So now we will go a little bit more deeper into the concept of Garbha Sharira in Ayurveda. I just tried to give an overview of what Sharira would mean from an Ayurvedic perspective. But now we will go to Garbha Sharira itself. If you look at the whole process of the creation of the microcosm, we can say that it is the seeding of consciousness in the womb of matter. So the creation can be considered as a process in which the expansive consciousness shrinks into dense matter and then impregnates it with the seed of consciousness itself. So matter is being impregnated with the seed of consciousness. That is the process of childbirth. And the consciousness, the whole process of our human life, the whole process of the expression of our life is an attempt of this consciousness to unfold and expand and transform the very matter which it inhabits. So this is the idea that we get from classical Ayurveda. So what Ayurveda says, it is possible to do a lot of interventions to change the course or destiny of the development of our own consciousness. This is called in Ayurveda as, the attempt to modify daiva or karmic engineering, if we can coin a term to describe this. The classical Ayurvedic texts say that Bali Purushakaro hi daivam apyati vartade. By putting in a lot of efforts, we can change the course of destiny. And this is a very positive from the classical Ayurvedic text, that if we, even before the child is born, the parents are kind of, counseled and made prepared to manifest a new life. So in Ayurveda, we say that karmic engineering can be done even as the fetus is growing in the pregnancy. In fact, even before the conception happens, it is possible to start influencing the personality of the individual. So we know that, what matters with an individual is the deeper inner personality. And the whole focus of Garbha Sharira in Ayurveda is centered around how we can influence this personality. And so we say here that with a great human effort, we can nullify the impact of the past deeds. And even the genetic footprints can be modified. Today we know that epigenetics is more important than the genetic makeup of an individual. So the regimen for pregnancy, childbirth and neonatal care in Ayurveda is aimed at the overall development of new life and laying a foundation for spiritual evolution at a very early stage in the life. So from an Ayurvedic point of view, conception is an opportunity to change the course of human destiny. We misunderstand the concept of karma. We think that the concept of karma means that we are going to be punished for the wrongs that we do. I mean, that's absolutely not the idea here. The theory of karma says that everybody has absolute freedom to do what they want. And we can do anything that we want. And all human problem in human life is the conflict that is created because everybody has absolute freedom. So my freedom gets into conflict with the freedom of another person, and that is why we need rules and regulations in society. Most of the engagements of human life in human society between individuals is negotiating the freedom that each other has. We negotiate and then we create a space where we can express our freedom without any interference and without disturbing, interfering with the activities of others. So the whole idea here is that I can have a choice in deciding what I want to do, but then I have to face the consequences of my actions. That is where we do not have a choice. We have a choice in deciding what we should do, but we have no choice in deciding the consequences of my actions. So the theory of karma only points out that we have to act responsibly. If we act out of ignorance, if we do an action which is not based on knowledge, then we may have to face an unexpected consequence. So this is the whole concept of karma. And Ayurveda tells that the theory of karma is applied in Garbha Sharira to, modulate the consequences of past inherited, all the things that we have inherited from the past lives. It could be even genetic inheritance. To what extent can we modify this by new actions? So this is a very positive and a constructive approach that we find from the tradition of Ayurveda. When a new life is born, it's a big opportunity for us to correct, modulate, and modify the course of this new life that is manifesting. So this becomes a big responsibility of the parents. So they cannot be, as we say, a child should not be born just by chance. A child should be born by conscious choice. The focus of Garbha Sharira in Ayurveda is to bring about a balance of all the elements that make the human personality. We must have a strong body, a strong mind that is capable of manifesting the deeper consciousness as powerfully as possible. It's very interesting that Ayurveda discusses the process of the conception as the manifestation of consciousness in Shukra and Artava. And a very interesting analogy is given. Shuddhe Shukrartave Sattva Swakarma Klesha Chodida Garbha Sampadyade Yukti Vashad Agnirivaranau. Just like when we rub the ironing, that is the wooden sticks together, after some effort, there is suddenly the spark of fire that manifests. Even so, by the coming together of the male and the female, the friction of their union, there is the spark of consciousness that is ignited. And that is how conception occurs. So this is beautifully described in the classical text Ashtanga Hridayam. Tejo yatharka rashminam spatigena tiraskridam nendhanam drishyate gacchad sattvo garbhasayam tatha. So this is invisible, just like the rays of the sun when it passes through a piece of glass or spatika or a crystal, it creates the spark of fire. We never see the movement of the light rays through this lens, but we only see the spark of fire that manifests. In a similar way, when conception occurs, we see only the physical union of the two individuals and the Shukra and Artava. But in that process happens this manifestation of the spark of consciousness. So there is a lot of discussion in the classical Ayurvedic texts as to what creates life. Today we know we are still unable to create life by combining chemicals. We know that what are the ingredients of life. But we still do not know how to bring all these ingredients together to create new life. I mean, we cannot just create new life by mixing, collection of chemicals to create the chemical life. In fact, the basis of life is a chemical soup. But still, by just mechanically mixing chemicals together, we cannot create new life. So this is still the deepest mystery. Life can be created only from pre-existing life. We have come and developed the technology of stem cells. We know now that we can do cloning, but still we need pre-existing life to create new life. So life, right from the moment the first life form was created, that same thread of consciousness is continuing up to this moment. I mean, this is a remarkable, unbroken continuity of the thread of consciousness that has been transmitted from one generation of life to the other across the diverse species in this universe. And this thread of consciousness is really the focus of Ayurveda in Garbha Sharira, and not just all the physical ingredients that make life. So we have in Charaka Samhita, in the Yajna-Purushiya Adhyaya, a debate on what is it that creates life. So if this is very interesting, and many of the multiple elements that constitute life are proposed as the most important cause for manifestation of life. So there is one school of thought which says that life emanates from consciousness or Atma. Another viewpoint says that no, life emanates from Sattva or the mind. And yet another viewpoint is that no, life is very physical, it just emanates from the digested food of the mother. And yet another viewpoint says that life is a combination of Shad Dhatus, that is the Panchamahabhutas and consciousness. Another school says that no, life emanates from Mata and Pita, the mother and the father. It's all just the genes inherited from the mother and father that makes life. Nothing else is required. Yet another viewpoint is that it is karma that creates life. And the naturalistic viewpoint says that it is just naturally, it is just the nature of that creates life. And then there is a view that life is created actually by a creator or Prajapati, and then time. So all these factors are discussed. And it's very interesting to find that the Charaka Samhita concludes that it is a multiplicity of factors that create life. It is a unique moment when all these factors come together, only then life is possible. And these are physical and transphysical elements that participate in the creation of life. And this is the interesting aspect of Garbha Sharira in Ayurveda, that Ayurveda has acknowledged that life is created by all these factors, both visible and invisible. And only when they all come together, the spark of life will manifest. So today when we look at life very physically, we only bring the physical ingredients together. And that is why we are not able to create life just by assembling dead matter together. Unless all these factors that Charaka Samhita talks about, that Atma, Sattva, Rasa, Shadhatu, Mata, Pita, Karma, Subhava, Prajapati, Kala, when all these things come together and create that golden moment for life to manifest, then a new life is created. And that is why the Srishti was considered to be a very sacred process. It is not just an accident of a pleasure-seeking communion of two individuals. So Ayurveda considers a multifactorial approach to understanding Garbha. And what is interesting here is that Ayurveda takes into account many factors that are not even considered, from a very reductionistic point of view. And Ayurveda gives us a framework to be able to modulate. There are factors which we can control, factors which we cannot control. So factors which we can control, we can control. Factors with which we cannot control, we must harmonize. This is a very important concept. Not only for Garbha Sharira, but in every aspect of treatment of life. Ayurveda says that the problem with reductionistic science is that it tries to control everything. Everything cannot come under our control. There are forces in nature that are more powerful, with which we have to harmonize. There are forces in nature with which we can control by our intervention. So a combination of harmony and control, this is how Garbha Sharira is described in Ayurveda. So the Ritu, the season, the fertile period, this is very important. And a lot of these things cannot be controlled because they happen through the normal physiological rhythms and cycles of the body. But what is it that we can control? What is it that we cannot? We need to understand. So Ayurveda gives you a framework to refer to this as Ritu, Kshetra, Ambu and Bija. The Ritu is the season or the fertile period. We have to wait for it. You cannot create it. The Kshetra is the field, the condition of the uterus. This is something which we can partly control, but partly we can only harmonize with it. Each individual is born, with certain predetermined, configurations, which we can modify to some extent, but which we cannot completely, change. Then comes the ambu, or the nutrition. This is a factor which we can completely control. What the mother is being fed, what the food that the mother eats is something which is fully under our control. But kshetra, or the uterus, the condition of the uterus, is only partly under our control. And then the bija, or the quality of the reproductive element. This is something which we cannot completely control and manipulate, but to some extent we can also modify. So Ayurveda tells us that we must prepare for the manifestation of new Garbha by listing and becoming aware that play a role in the manifestation of new life, and control all those factors which we can, and then try to harmonize with all those factors that are beyond our control. So this multifactorial development of the Garbha is beautifully described in the Charaka Samhita, when he says that the Garbha is shaped from the Shukra and Shodhi, the genetic material from the parents, Kala Garbhashaya Prakriti, the environmental and intra-uterine conditions, Madhura Ahara Vihara Prakriti, the diet and lifestyle of the mother, and the Mahabhuta Vigara Prakriti, that is the quality of the material elements. So all these factors, when they come together, they create new life. So this gives us a framework to understand what we can do, what we cannot do, and to what extent we can modify the quality of a new life that is being created. In fact, the whole focus of our tradition of samskara means that making the new generation better and better. Samskara means to refine. That is how the word Sanskrit also comes from, the word samskritam, or refine. The whole focus of our culture, we say that our culture is not progressive. I mean, we are always talking about the past. Absolutely not. The word samskara itself shows that we are very progressive in looking to the future. We are trying to refine every aspect of human experience till it becomes perfect. So it is a work in progress. Culture is a work in progress. It is a kind of a continuous aspiration towards more and more perfection. And that is what the word samskara means. And Garbha is one of the most important aspects of samskara. The change or the refinement that we want to bring into society. Ayurveda says that even before conception, we must begin this process. And this is what we call by conscious birthing. I mean, giving rise to a new life with utmost consciousness and participation. So for this foundation of a good life, Garbha Shariram consists of different topics. The point in my discussion today is, simply put, is to offer, the first thoughts of how we can reinvent the subject Shariram. How we can divide Shariram into the various topics like Srishti Shariram, Garbha Shariram, Dosha Shariram, then Marma Shariram, Pramana Shariram, Sankhya Shariram, then Prakriti Shariram and Vikriti Shariram. This is a new way of looking at, it's not a new way, it's all there in the classical text, but it's a much more comprehensive way of understanding Shariram from an Ayurvedic perspective. And each of these divisions of Shariram can be further subdivided. And here I am proposing how Garbha Shariram can be subclassified. So we start with Ritumati Charya. So all these divisions tell us at which points we can actually intervene. Where is an opportunity to modify and create a new samskara? So Ritumati Charya is regimen during the period of menstruation. How a woman behaves and expresses herself during the period of Ritucharya is very, very important. Ritumati. Because the word Ritucharya is also for the seasonal regimen, so it might be confusing if we tell Ritucharya. It's better to use the word Ritumati Charya. And I've always been intrigued by the physiology of menstruation in women. It with great effort that in 14 days the body creates the conditions for one ovum to mature, and in great anticipation ovulation happens for the creation of a new life, and the ovum enters into the uterus, But in the next 15 days, a tremendous destruction happens. That very ovum which was created in anticipation of, manifesting a new life is being destroyed by the body in 15 days, and the woman bleeds and, removes the seed from her body. So this is such a contradiction. In the first 14 days, the first 2 weeks of the menstrual cycle is a very creative phase, and the second 2 weeks of the menstrual cycle is a very destructive phase. It's almost like, you're rolling a stone up the hill with so much of effort only to push it down again. And Ayurveda said that the women has to go through this psychological process during the menstrual period, that they have to come to terms with this contradiction in their physiology, and that will help them to prepare themselves better for birthing. And that is why the Ritumati Charya is given very great importance. Women were actually given the freedom to, keep away from the responsibilities and activities during the period of menstruation. It's not an imposition of restriction, rather it's the granting of a freedom to keep away and come to terms with their own physiology. So next comes the Garbhadhana Vidhi, how we can engage in a process of conscious conception. So when the woman contemplates during the period of menstruation what is happening to her body, that there is this possibility of nurturing a new life, or just destroying it even before it is manifest. So this is the dilemma that a woman faces during the process of menstruation. And that is, the dilemma is there for us to take a conscious choice of whether, so this is the question that the process of menstruation poses. To create or not to create, the choice is there. The choice is with the woman. The woman can take a conscious choice to decide whether a new life should be created. This is very important. When the woman does not have control over the process of ovulation or menstruation, unlike the male who has full control over the process of releasing the reproductive element. It is in the control of the mind of the man. He can decide whether or not to release the reproductive element. As far as the woman is concerned, it is an opportunity. The ovulation happens automatically, and if there is no conception, then the ovum is washed out of the system through the process of menstruation. So Garbhadhana Vidhi is the point where a conscious decision is being made to nurture a new life. And so once conception occurs, then we have Garbhini Charya, then the Prasuti Charya, or the process of birthing, and then the Sutika Charya, which is postnatal care, and then the Jata Karma Vidhi, which is the care of the newborn, and then the Shodasha Samskaras. So this we can see is a process of continuing the refinement of life, the evolution of life. We can say that up to human beings, the evolution of life happens not so consciously. In all life forms other than humans, there is only one birth and one growth. The birth of the physical body and then the growth of the physical body makes the whole life cycle complete. But in human beings alone, we need to not just be born physically and grow physically, we also need to evolve psycho-spiritually. So that psycho-spiritual growth, that psycho-spiritual evolution is actually what also enables us to achieve higher levels of health. And this is the conceptual framework in which Ayurveda looks at Garbha Sharira.